The day everything changed started like any other Tuesday. I was sitting at our kitchen island, coffee growing cold beside my laptop, finalizing the details for our vow renewal ceremony. 12 years of marriage deserved a celebration, and Hawaii seemed perfect. The honeymoon destination we couldn't afford when we were young and struggling. That's when I saw it. Or rather, didn't see it. The $42,000 we'd been saving for 3 years was gone. Our joint account balance stared back at me, $837.42. In that moment, I felt a sickening drop in my stomach, like missing a step on a staircase in the dark. 12 years of marriage crystallized into that single account balance, a number that told me everything I needed to know about the man I thought I knew. I'm Elizabeth Turner, and my husband didn't just take our wedding renewal fund. He used it to finance a secret life with another woman while I was picking out renewal vows. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I remember staring at the computer screen, my fingers trembling as I scrolled through our transaction history. 3 withdrawals over 8 weeks, $15,000, $12,000, and finally, $15,000. Each one made while I was working late shifts at the physical therapy clinic I managed. The clinic where I healed others while my own life was being dismantled without my knowledge. My first instinct was to call Ryan immediately. We'd been married since I was 24, built our lives together from a tiny apartment to our charming colonial in Riverside with the garden I'd spent 4 summers perfecting. We'd survived job changes, a miscarriage, and his mother's difficult battle with cancer. Surely there was an explanation for this, some investment opportunity or family emergency he'd forgotten to mention. Ryan's phone went straight to voicemail. His professional, upbeat greeting now seemed like a mockery. "Ryan, it's me. There's money missing from our account, all of our renewal fund. Call me back immediately." My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, too controlled, too calm for the storm raging inside me. I sat in our kitchen, the one we'd renovated together last spring, suddenly seeing it through new eyes. The marble countertops he'd insisted were worth the extra expense. The custom cabinets I'd thought extravagant but agreed to because he'd been so excited, all paid for with my income as much as his. Our finances merged as completely as I thought our lives were. While waiting for Ryan's call, I did what any practical woman might do. I investigated. Our wedding renewal fund disappearing wasn't the only financial anomaly, I quickly discovered. There were credit card statements showing charges for restaurants I'd never been to, hotels in the city where we lived, and a jewelry purchase from Tiffany's 3 months ago, around our anniversary when I'd received a potted orchid. My phone buzzed, not Ryan, but my assistant from the clinic, Karen. "Hey, how's the planning going? Found your perfect renewal dress yet?" she asked cheerfully. "Ryan emptied our savings account," I said, the words tumbling out before I could contain them. "Over $42,000. It's all gone." "What? Elizabeth, are you serious? Could it be fraud or a bank error?" "It's not fraud, at least not the kind the bank would care about," I replied, pulling up our credit card statement on my laptop. "He's been making charges at restaurants I've never been to, booking hotel rooms in our own city, buying gifts I've never received." "Jesus, Liz, do you think he's having an affair?" "Yes," I said, the word burning my throat. "And using our renewal fund to finance it." Karen urged me to call the bank immediately, but I'd already tried. The transfers had been authorized by Ryan with his password and security questions. Without his consent or a court order, the money couldn't be retrieved. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our perfectly manicured lawn in our perfectly respectable neighborhood. The Johnsons across the street were walking their golden retriever. Mrs. Patterson next door was collecting her mail. Everything looked so normal while my life was imploding. "I need to figure out where he is," I said, more to myself than to Karen. "I'll come over," she offered immediately. No, I need to handle this myself first. I'll call you back. I hung up and started searching through Ryan's desk drawer in our home office. The top drawers held the usual office supplies, neatly organized. Ryan had always been meticulous. The bottom drawer contained a stack of financial folders, also impeccably arranged. I hadn't paid much attention to our finances since Ryan, a financial advisor, had taken them over 3 years ago. Another red flag I'd missed. Beneath the financial folders, I found a leather portfolio I didn't recognize. Inside was a brochure for Lakeside luxury condominiums on Lake Geneva, a weekend getaway destination about 2 hours from our home in Madison, Wisconsin. Several units were circled, including a waterfront property listed at $585,000. Across the top, in Ryan's neat handwriting, options for V and R. R for Ryan, not E for Elizabeth. My hands shook as I flipped through the brochure. A business card fell out. Victoria Winters, pharmaceutical sales representative. On the back, in flowing handwriting, can't wait for our place to be ready. Missing. You always when you're with her, V. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. Victoria. I knew her, or thought I did. She'd attended Ryan's company Christmas party last year as a client. Tall, confident, stylish in that effortless way I could never quite achieve between managing the clinic and keeping our home running. Ryan had introduced us himself, his hand lingering on her lower back in a way that should have registered as inappropriate. I sank into Ryan's office chair, photos of our life together staring back at me from the bookshelf. Our wedding day, the hiking trip to Yellowstone, Christmas with my parents in Florida. Had all of it been a lie? Or just the recent years? Phone chimed with a text from Ryan. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Working late with Victoria, apparently. Perhaps viewing their future Lakeside condo together with my renewal fund as the down payment. I texted back, "Where is our money?" Ryan? 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally, "What are you talking about?" The $42,000 missing from our savings account. No response for several minutes. Then, "We need to talk about this in person. Not now." "You're right. We do," I replied, a strange calm settling over me as shock gave way to cold clarity. "I'm coming to your office." "I'm not at the office. I'm at a client meeting." Liar. I knew exactly where to find him. 3 years ago, I'd given Ryan an Apple Watch for his birthday. It had a feature I'd set up, but he'd never noticed. Location sharing linked to my Apple ID in case he ever lost it or had an emergency. I opened the app on my phone, holding my breath. If he'd discovered it, if he'd disabled it. The map loaded. A blinking blue dot appeared. Not at his downtown office, not at any client meeting site I knew of. The address was a hotel downtown, one I recognized from the credit card statements. I grabbed my purse and car keys, anger propelling me toward the door. Then I paused, the rational part of my brain breaking through the fury. Confronting them at the hotel would be satisfying, but potentially unwise. I needed more information, more evidence. I returned to Ryan's office and methodically went through everything: filing cabinets, desk drawers, even the small safe in the closet that I knew the combination to. The evidence mounted with each discovery. A separate credit card I knew nothing about, statements from an account at Wisconsin Federal Credit Union, a bank we didn't use, showing a balance of just over $175,000 in Ryan's name only. How long had he been hiding money? The statement history showed regular deposits over the past 4 years, small enough not to be missed from our joint finances but substantial when accumulated. Money that should have been part of our shared life had been systematically diverted to fund his escape plan. My lawyer brain, from my previous career before switching to physical therapy after our marriage, kicked in through the emotional. Fog. Document everything. Create a paper trail. Don't tip your hand too early. I took photos of everything with my phone, careful to replace each document exactly as I'd found it. By the time I finished, evening had fallen, and my phone showed multiple missed texts from Ryan. "I'll be home late. We can talk tomorrow." Tomorrow, when he thought he'd have time to craft his lies, to create a plausible explanation for the missing money. Maybe he'd claim it was a business investment gone wrong. Maybe he'd say he was planning a surprise. I texted back just 2 words. "Okay, tomorrow." But as I sat surrounded by evidence of my husband's betrayal, I knew tomorrow would bring something. Very different than what Ryan expected. Because what he didn't know, what I had never told him, was that I had always kept a separate account of my own. Not for an affair, not for escape, but because my grandmother had taught me long ago that a smart woman always maintains her own resources. And those resources were about to become very, very important. I closed the folders, wiped away my tears, and opened my laptop to check another account, one Ryan knew nothing about. It was time to make some plans of my own. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay in our king-sized bed, the one Ryan and I had picked out together when we bought this house, and stared at the ceiling. My mind raced through calculations, scenarios, and plans. By the time the first light of dawn filtered through our bedroom curtains, I had moved beyond shock and into a cold. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Clear determination. My first stop in the morning was the bank. Not our regular bank, but Wisconsin Trust, where my personal account was held. The account that had started with an inheritance from my grandmother and grown slowly but steadily, with small deposits from my therapy clinic's performance bonuses Ryan thought were smaller than they actually were. "Ms. Turner, always good to see you," said Harold Morgan, the bank manager who had known me since I opened the account. "What can I do for you today?" "I need to discuss some financial matters, Harold, in private if possible." In his office, I explained my situation in clinical terms, detailing Ryan's withdrawal of our joint savings and my discovery of his hidden accounts. "You might want to consider protecting your remaining assets," Harold suggested after hearing my story. "I'm already on it," I assured him. "One more question. Has Ryan ever attempted to access information about my accounts here?" Harold checked his system. "No. We have no record of anyone but you making inquiries or transactions." At least Ryan hadn't discovered my financial independence. That would be my advantage in what was coming. My next stop was to see Patricia Flores, a respected divorce attorney recommended by a friend who'd gone through her own painful divorce 2 years earlier. I hadn't called ahead for an appointment, but Patricia made time for me after hearing the urgency in my voice. "Financially speaking, you've got a clear case of dissipation of marital assets," Patricia said after I laid out the situation. "The court will likely require him to account for every penny taken from joint funds and potentially reimburse the marital estate." "What about his hidden account? The one with $175,000? That's even more serious. Concealment of marital assets is something judges take very dimly. You have an excellent claim to those funds in a divorce proceeding." I nodded, already planning my next move. "What about the condo he's planning to buy for his girlfriend? Can I make a claim on that?" "Absolutely. If he uses marital funds for the down payment, you have a strong claim. Do you have proof that the money went directly to that purchase?" I hesitated. "Not yet, but I will." Patricia gave me a sympathetic look. "Elizabeth, you know what I'm going to say next. Document everything. Don't confront him until you have all your evidence in order. And whatever you do, don't leave the marital home. That can complicate property division." After leaving Patricia's office, I drove to the county records office. It took an hour of searching, but I found what I feared. Ryan had submitted paperwork for a lake property purchase at Geneva Lake with a down payment of $120,000 listed. The purchase wasn't complete, but it was in process, with only his name on the documents. Despite Wisconsin being a community property state where such assets should be jointly owned in a marriage, I filed an objection immediately, citing potential fraud and unauthorized use of marital assets. The clerk assured me the transaction would be flagged pending investigation. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "Working from home today. Thought we were talking tonight?" So he'd been home and noticed my absence. Good. Let him wonder what I was doing. Let him feel a fraction of the uncertainty he'd inflicted on me. I didn't reply. Instead, I drove to Lake Geneva. I needed to see this property he'd chosen with Victoria. Needed to make it real in my mind. The Lakeside luxury condominiums were exactly as advertised. Sprawling, contemporary buildings with private boat slips and panoramic lake views. Unit 412, the one from the purchase documents, had a sale pending sign in the window. I parked across the street and waited. Within 20 minutes, a familiar black Audi pulled into the parking lot, Ryan's car. Beside him sat Victoria, her long blonde hair unmistakable even from a distance. I took photos with my phone as they entered the building with a realtor, documenting everything. An hour later, they emerged, laughing together. Ryan pulled Victoria close, kissing her in full view of anyone watching. She playfully pushed him away before getting into his car. I had all the confirmation I needed. Ryan wasn't just having an affair. He was building a new life with another woman using money from our marriage. When I returned home, Ryan's car was in the driveway. I took a deep breath before entering, steadying myself for the confrontation to come. He was in the kitchen, attempting to cook dinner, something he rarely did unless trying to make amends for something. "There you are," he said with forced casualness. I was getting worried. "Were you?" I asked, setting my purse down on the counter. "That's interesting." He gave me his most charming smile, the one that had once made my heart flutter. Now, it just made my skin crawl. About the account, I wanted to explain. I've been working on a special investment opportunity. I should have told you, but I wanted it to be a surprise. A surprise, I repeated flatly. Like the condo at Lake Geneva? The wooden spoon he was holding froze mid-stir. What? Unit 412 at Lakeside Luxury Condominiums, the one you were viewing today with Victoria. His face paled, then flushed with anger. "You followed me? What's wrong with you?" "What's wrong with me?" I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. "You steal our wedding renewal fund, hide it in a secret account, use it for a down payment on a condo with your girlfriend, and you're asking what's wrong with me? You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I interrupted. "I've seen the credit card statements, Ryan. The hotel charges, the restaurants, the jewelry you bought Victoria for Valentine's Day while giving me a cookbook. I found your secret account statements. I know about the $175,000 you've been hiding." He stared at me, calculation replacing the initial shock in his eyes. "It's not what you think." "It never is with men like you," I said quietly. "Let me guess. Victoria understands you in ways I never could. Your connection is special. You didn't mean for it to happen." His expression confirmed every cliché. "How long?" I asked. "Elizabeth, how long?" He sighed, dropping the pretense. 2 years, but it wasn't serious until recently. 2 years. Half of our renewal fund had been accumulating while he was already involved with her. The irony was almost too much to bear. "I want you out of this house tonight," I said calmly. "This is my house too. You can't just..." "Actually, I can. I've already spoken with an attorney. You've committed financial fraud by emptying our joint account without consent and attempting to use marital assets to purchase property solely in your name. I've filed an objection with the county clerk. The Lake Geneva purchase is on hold pending investigation." Ryan's face darkened. "You had no right." "I had every right," I cut him off. just as I have every right to file for divorce, citing financial misconduct and adultery. Your choice, Ryan. Leave tonight voluntarily, or I call my attorney and we proceed immediately with filing for emergency orders, freezing all assets and accounts. He stared at me for a long moment, perhaps seeing me clearly for the first time in years. Not as the accommodating wife who managed our home while he built his career, but as a woman fully capable of protecting herself. I need to pack some things, he finally said. You have 1 hour. While Ryan gathered his belongings upstairs, I sat at the kitchen table, a strange calm settling over me. The confrontation had gone much as expected. Denials, then minimization, then anger when his manipulations failed. The man I had married, the one I thought I knew, had shown his true character. My phone buzzed with a text from Karen. How are you holding up? Need company? He's packing. Leaving tonight, I replied, coming over with wine, no arguments. An hour later, Ryan carried 2 suitcases to the door. He paused, looking back at me with an expression that might have been regret or merely calculation. This isn't over, Elizabeth. You're right, I agreed. It's just beginning. After he left, I changed the security code on our alarm system and called a locksmith to come first thing in the morning. Then I opened the bottle of wine Karen brought over and told her everything. The affair, the hidden money, the confrontation. What will you do now? She asked when I finished. I took a sip of wine, considering the question. The immediate crisis was managed, but the road ahead remained uncertain. The divorce would be complicated. Financial untangling always was. But beyond that lay the bigger question. What did I want my life to look like on the other side of this betrayal? Remember that commercial space near the clinic that's been vacant for months? I asked. The old Victorian building with the gorgeous woodwork? Karen nodded. The one you always said would make a perfect wellness center? I'm going to buy it, I said decisively. Or at least lease it with an option to buy. Karen's eyebrows rose. With what money? I thought Ryan took your savings. He took our joint savings, I corrected. But I have my own account he knows nothing about. My grandmother's inheritance plus what I've been saving from my bonuses. It's not enough to buy the building outright, but it's enough for a down payment and renovations. You're serious about this, Karen said, studying my face. Dead serious. Ryan took our renewal fund to build a future with another woman. I'm going to use my savings to build a future for myself. One he's not part of. The next morning, I called Alexander Reed, a commercial real estate agent I'd met through the clinic. By noon, I was touring the Victorian building, 3 stories, of potential with original hardwood floors, large windows, and a central staircase that took my breath away. The owner is motivated to sell, Alex explained as we walked through the space. The building needs work, but the structure is sound. With your vision for a wellness center, this could be transformed into something spectacular. I could see it already. The first floor with a welcoming reception area, treatment rooms for various therapies, perhaps a small retail space for wellness products. The second floor could house fitness areas, a yoga studio, meditation rooms. The third floor might become office space or specialized treatment areas. What's the asking price? I asked. $450,000, but I think we could get it for $420,000. The building's been vacant for over a year. Almost the exact amount Ryan had taken from our renewal fund. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. I can put down $90,000 immediately, I said. And I'd like to explore financing options for the remainder. Alex looked surprised at my readiness. I'll draw up an offer today. That afternoon, I met with Mark Chen, a business advisor recommended by Patricia. I explained my vision for Renewal Wellness Center, a comprehensive facility offering physical therapy, massage, acupuncture, nutritional counseling, and mental health services all under one roof. You're looking at a significant investment, Mark cautioned after reviewing the numbers. Beyond the building purchase, you'll need at least another $100,000 for renovations and initial operating costs. I know, I acknowledged, but I also know the demand is there. My current clinic is constantly turning away clients or putting them on long wait lists, and we regularly refer out for complementary services patients would prefer to have in one location. What about your divorce proceedings? Mark asked. Could those complicate your financial situation? Potentially, I admitted. But the funds I'm using for this venture have been separate throughout my marriage. My attorney believes they won't be considered marital assets subject to division. Mark nodded thoughtfully. I've seen too many businesses fail because they were started for emotional reasons rather than sound business ones. But in your case, I think the two might actually align. You have the professional experience, an established client base, and a clear vision for what's missing in the market. He helped me draft a business plan that evening, outlining startup costs, projected revenue streams, staffing needs, and growth targets. By the time we finished, I had a clear roadmap for turning my vision into reality. The next day brought an unexpected development. Patricia called with news that Ryan had contacted his own attorney, who had reached out to discuss potential settlement terms. He's offering to return the $42,000 he took from your joint account and provide documentation about his separate account at Wisconsin Federal, Patricia explained. In exchange, he wants an expedited, amicable divorce without claims of financial misconduct or adultery. He's worried about his professional reputation, I realized. Financial advisors who steal from their wives don't inspire client confidence. Precisely. This gives us leverage. I think we can push for half of his hidden account as well. It's money accumulated during your marriage and legally should be considered a marital asset. What about the Lake Geneva property? He's offering to withdraw from the purchase entirely. I considered the proposal. Getting back our renewal fund plus half of Ryan's hidden account would provide nearly $130,000, enough to cover most of the renovation costs for Renewal Wellness Center after my down payment. Tell his attorney we'll consider the offer with some modifications, I decided. I want written acknowledgement of his financial misconduct, half of the hidden account balance, and the return of our joint savings. Plus, I keep the house with no claim from him. Patricia sounded impressed. That's a strong counter. I'll convey it immediately. While legal negotiations proceeded, I moved forward with my plans for Renewal Wellness Center. My offer on the Victorian building was accepted. I hired an architect to design the renovation, focusing on creating a space that felt both professional and nurturing. I reached out to colleagues from the medical community, massage therapists, nutritionists, mental health counselors, gauging interest in joining my venture. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Karen, who had recently completed additional certification in sports massage, was the first to officially join the team. I've been waiting for an opportunity like this, she said when I offered her a position. Somewhere that approaches wellness holistically instead of treating symptoms in isolation. 3 weeks after Ryan moved out, our divorce settlement was finalized, remarkably quickly by normal standards. He agreed to all my terms, clearly eager to resolve the matter before it could affect his professional standing. The irony wasn't lost on me that our divorce proceedings, expected to be contentious, concluded more quickly than our wedding plans had 12 years ago. The day I received the settlement funds, I walked through the partially renovated Victorian that would become Renewal Wellness Center. Contractors were installing new electrical systems, updating plumbing, and preparing to restore the original woodwork. Throughout the building, standing in what would become the main reception area, watching sunlight stream through the tall windows, I felt something I hadn't experienced since discovering Ryan's betrayal, genuine excitement for the future. My phone chimed with a text. From Ryan. Settlement funds transferred. Hope you're satisfied. I didn't respond immediately, taking time to consider my reply. Finally, I typed, "The funds are confirmed. Thank you for the seed money for my new business." I attached a digital rendering of the Renewal Wellness Center's planned exterior, showing the beautifully restored Victorian with new signage. His response came quickly. "You're using our money for a business? That wasn't part of the agreement." "Not our money," I corrected. "My settlement funds to use as I see fit, as you used our renewal fund for your condo with Victoria." He didn't reply. What Ryan couldn't have known was that the Victorian building I'd purchased was located just 2 blocks from his financial advisory office. The same office where Victoria worked as a pharmaceutical sales rep, making regular visits to medical practices in the area. 6 months later, Renewal Wellness Center opened its doors. The renovation had transformed the neglected Victorian into a state-of-the-art wellness facility while preserving its historic character. Local media covered the opening, highlighting our innovative approach to integrated health services. On our 3rd day of operation, I looked up from the reception desk to see Victoria walk through the front door. She froze when she recognized me, clearly unaware that I owned the beautiful new wellness center everyone in the medical community was talking about. "Elizabeth?" she stammered. "I didn't realize this was your place." "Welcome to Renewal," I said professionally. "Are you here for an appointment or just browsing?" She shifted uncomfortably. "Just looking around. I've heard good things." "Feel free to take a brochure. We're offering introductory specials on all services this month." Victoria studied me for a moment, perhaps trying to reconcile the confident business owner before her with the betrayed wife she'd helped deceive. "Ryan and I aren't together anymore," she finally said. "I thought you should know." I nodded, unsurprised. "I wish you both well." After she left, Karen appeared from one of the treatment rooms. "Was that who I think it was?" "Yes," I confirmed. "Apparently she and Ryan didn't last." "How do you feel about that?" I considered the question carefully. Honestly? Nothing. Their relationship was built on lies and stolen dreams. It was never going to last. 1 year after opening, Renewal Wellness Center had exceeded all projections in our business plan. We'd expanded our service offerings twice, hired additional staff, and developed a waiting list for new clients. The building that had once stood empty now hummed with activity from early morning until evening, 7 days a week. Mark Chen, my business advisor who had become a friend, joined me for coffee in my office to review our first-year financials. "You've created something remarkable here," he said, studying the growth charts. "Most new businesses struggle their first year. Yours has thrived." "It wasn't just me," I acknowledged. "The entire team has contributed to our success." "True, but it was your vision and your courage to pursue it at one of the most difficult moments of your life." I glanced out my office window at the busy reception area below, where clients were checking in for their appointments. Sometimes I think about how none of this would exist if Ryan hadn't betrayed me. If he hadn't taken our renewal fund, I might never have found the courage to create this place. Mark smiled. "The best revenge isn't just living well. It's building something meaningful from what was meant to destroy you." That evening, I received an unexpected email from Ryan, the first direct communication since our divorce had finalized. "I drive past your wellness center every day on my way to my new office," he wrote. "It's impossible to miss how successful it's become. I wanted to say that I'm sorry for my part in our ending, but perhaps somewhat glad that it led to your new beginning. What you've built is impressive." I read the message twice, searching for hidden manipulation or agenda, but finding none. After careful consideration, I replied with just 3 words. "Thank you. Be well." 2 years to the day after discovering Ryan's betrayal, I stood on the steps of Renewal Wellness Center beside Karen and our team, cutting a ribbon to celebrate the opening of our second location, a smaller facility on the other side of Madison, extending our services to a new community. Local news covered the event, interviewing me about the rapid growth of our wellness concept and our plans for the future. "What inspired you to create Renewal?" the reporter asked. I smiled, thinking of the long journey from betrayed wife to successful entrepreneur. I believe that sometimes our deepest wounds can become our greatest purpose, I said. Renewal began as my personal healing journey, but it's grown into something that helps hundreds of others find their own path to wellness. What I didn't say, what would remain private, was that the wedding renewal fund my husband had stolen to build a future with another woman had ultimately financed the seed of an enterprise that now employed 15 people, served over 1,000 clients, and had become more fulfilling than my marriage had ever been. That night, I returned to the original Victorian building after hours, walking through the quiet rooms that had once been empty and neglected, but now served as spaces of healing and transformation. In the peaceful stillness, I felt profound gratitude for the painful awakening that had led me here. Ryan had used our wedding fund for his mistress, so I'd used his hidden savings for my wellness center. But in the end, what I'd really done was transform betrayal into purpose, and that was worth far more than any amount of money. With the first location of Renewal Wellness Center thriving beyond my initial projections, I found myself facing a new challenge: managing success. The Victorian building that had once stood empty now operated at full capacity from dawn until evening. Our appointment calendar was booked 3 weeks in advance. Each therapist, counselor, and wellness practitioner had developed their own loyal client base. The business that had been born from betrayal had evolved into something I could never have envisioned while planning a vow renewal ceremony with Ryan. One Wednesday afternoon, I sat in my office reviewing expansion proposals with Karen, who had become my unofficial business partner in all but financial investment. "The numbers don't lie," Karen said, pointing to our quarterly revenue report. "We're turning away many potential clients. Either we extend hours further, hire more staff for the current location, or open a second center." I studied the growth projections considering our options. Extended hours would burn out our team eventually, and we're already using every inch of this building efficiently. The Victorian had been renovated to maximize space. Treatment rooms filled the first floor, movement studios and consultation spaces occupied the second, and the third floor housed administrative offices and specialized therapy rooms. We'd even converted the basement into a tranquil hydrotherapy space with heated pools and specialized shower treatments. "So, location number 2, Karen concluded. "Question is, where?" I had been considering this question for months, quietly, researching commercial real estate listings and demographic data across Madison. The answer had been crystallizing gradually: the east side of town, where healthcare options were limited despite a growing residential population. "I've actually been looking at a property," I admitted, pulling up photos on my laptop. "The old library branch on Lakeside Street. They relocated to a new building last year, and the space has been sitting empty. It's smaller than this location, but has good bones, high ceilings, large windows, accessible entrance." Karen studied the images. "How much?" "Listed at $375,000, but the city owns it and wants it occupied. I think we could get it for less, especially if we emphasize the community health benefits." "Could we afford it?" Karen asked. "The first location took nearly everything you had." I smiled, pulling up another document. "That's the beautiful thing about success. Our credit position is completely different now. The bank has pre-approved us for financing based on our first-year performance. And with the profit we've been generating, we can handle the down payment without touching our operational reserves." The transformation of my financial situation still amazed me sometimes. From the devastation of discovering Ryan's theft to building a thriving business that now qualified for significant commercial lending, all in just over a year. Karen looked impressed. "You've been planning this for a while." "Let's call it thoughtful preparation," I replied. "I've learned not to act from emotion alone." That evening, as I walked through our center after the last clients had left, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. Each treatment room represented not just a revenue stream, but a different approach to healing: physical therapy, massage, acupuncture, nutritional counseling, mental health support. Together, they created a comprehensive approach to wellness that addressed the whole person, not just isolated symptoms. In a way, that integrated approach mirrored my own healing process. The financial betrayal had been just one dimension of Ryan's deception. Recovering required more than just securing the money he'd taken. It meant rebuilding my sense of self, reclaiming my professional purpose, and creating new connections to replace the partnership I'd lost. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark Chen, my business advisor. Excellent news. City Council member James Wilson wants to meet about the Lakeside property. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. at his office? I confirmed immediately. Having a council member interested in our expansion could expedite permits and potentially help with favorable terms on the city-owned building. The next morning, I arrived at City Hall 15 minutes early, dressed in a navy suit that projected professional confidence. James Wilson's assistant showed me into a spacious office with large windows overlooking Madison's downtown. "Ms. Turner, thank you for coming," Wilson said, rising from behind his desk. A man in his 50s with salt and pepper, hair and a trim build, he exuded the polished charisma of a career politician. "I've heard remarkable things about Renewal Wellness Center." "Thank you, Councilman. We're proud of what we've built." "Please call me James, and you should be proud. Your center has revitalized that entire block. Property values in the area have increased 12% since you opened." I hadn't been tracking that particular metric, but it made sense. What had once been a neglected Victorian on a declining commercial street was now a beautifully restored anchor business that drew hundreds of clients weekly. "I understand you're interested in the old Lakeside library," Wilson continued. "Yes, we've outgrown our current location faster than anticipated. The Lakeside property would allow us to serve the East Side community while maintaining our commitment to restoring historic buildings." Wilson nodded approvingly. "That's exactly why I wanted to meet. The city has received several offers for that property, including from developers who want to demolish it for modern retail space." My heart sank. Deep-pocketed developers could easily outbid us. "But," Wilson continued, "the council is prioritizing proposals that preserve the building's character and provide valuable community services. Your wellness center model checks both boxes." Hope flickered again. "We're prepared to submit a formal proposal outlining our vision for the space, projected community impact, and financial terms." "Excellent. I'd also like to discuss something." Wilson leaned forward slightly. "The city is launching a health initiative focused on underserved populations. Would Renewal be interested in partnering to provide services to citizens who might not otherwise access wellness care?" The possibility instantly intrigued me. "What kind of partnership are you imagining?" "Perhaps a program where the city subsidizes services for qualifying residents. We'd pay a discounted rate, and you'd gain clients who might eventually become paying customers as their situations improve." The conversation continued for nearly an hour as we explored possibilities. By the time we concluded, we had outlined a potential collaboration that would not only help secure the Lakeside property, but would also extend Renewal services to people who desperately needed them but couldn't afford traditional health care. As I left City Hall, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. What had begun as my personal healing journey was evolving into something with broader community impact. Back at Renewal, I shared the developments with Karen. "This could change everything," she said, excitement evident in her voice. "Not just a second location, but a whole new dimension to what we do." "It feels right," I agreed, using our success to create access for others. We spent the remainder of the day drafting our proposal for the Lakeside property, integrating the community partnership concept Wilson had suggested. The work energized me in a way I hadn't experienced since the original center's planning phase. That evening, as I was preparing to leave, the front desk attendant stopped me. "Elizabeth, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment but insists it's important." I checked my watch, nearly 7 p.m. "Who is it?" She says her name is Victoria Winters. The name hit like an unexpected wave of cold. Water. Ryan's former mistress. The woman he'd planned to buy the Lake Geneva condo with using our wedding renewal fund. She had visited the center once before, shortly after we opened, but I hadn't seen her since. I considered declining, claiming fatigue or a prior commitment, but curiosity won out. "Send her to my office, please." Victoria looked different than I remembered. Less polished, more subdued. The confident pharmaceutical rep who had once intimidated me with her effortless style now seemed smaller somehow, more human. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, taking the seat I offered across from my desk. "What can I do for you, Victoria?" I kept my tone professional, neither friendly nor hostile. She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "This is awkward, but I felt I needed to speak with you directly. I've applied for the nutritional counselor position at Renewal. Your HR department doesn't know about our connection. I wanted to tell you myself before you saw my application." The nutritional counselor position. We had posted it just last week after our previous counselor accepted a research position at the university. Victoria's background in pharmaceutical sales wouldn't necessarily qualify her, though she might have additional education I wasn't aware of. "You're a nutritional counselor now?" I asked, unable to keep surprise from my voice. She nodded. "I completed certification last year, after everything that happened." She paused, seemingly searching for words. "Let's just say working with Ryan made me reevaluate some things, including my career." "I see," I said neutrally. "May I ask why Renewal specifically? There must be other opportunities that don't involve such complicated history." Victoria looked me directly in the eye for the first time. "Because what you've built here is exceptional. Because the integrated approach you've developed is exactly what I believe healthcare should be. And yes, perhaps also because I owe you something I can never repay. And working to further your vision feels like at least acknowledging that debt." Her honesty caught me off guard. I had expected excuses, perhaps even indignation at the suggestion that our past should influence professional decisions. Instead, she was acknowledging the harm done and its continuing ripples. "I'll consider your application alongside all others," I said finally. "I can't promise special treatment, positive or negative. We hire based on qualifications and fit with our team philosophy." "That's all I'm asking," she replied, standing to leave. "Thank you for hearing me out." After Victoria left, I sat in my office for a long time, processing the unexpected encounter. The woman who had once represented everything I had lost now wanted to become part of what I had built from that loss. The irony wasn't lost on me. I pulled up her application in our system, reviewing it objectively. Her qualifications were actually quite impressive. Certification from a respected program, specialized training in sports nutrition, and experience developing dietary protocols for patients with chronic conditions. Under different circumstances, she would easily make our shortlist for interviews. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The display showed Ryan Turner, my ex-husband's name still in my contacts, despite our lack of communication over the past year. I hesitated before answering. "Hello?" "Elizabeth." Ryan's voice sounded exactly as I remembered, bringing a complex rush of emotions I thought I'd processed long ago. "I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." "What do you need, Ryan?" I kept my tone even, professional. "I just heard from Victoria that she applied for a position at your center," he said. "I wanted to make sure you knew it wasn't my suggestion. I had no idea until she told me today." So they were still in contact, if not romantically involved. Interesting. Thank you for the clarification, though it wasn't necessary, I replied. We hire based on qualifications, not personal history. Right, of course. He paused. While I have you, I wanted to say that what you've done with renewal is remarkable. Everyone in Madison's talking about it. The compliment felt strange coming from him. Thank you. I drive past it sometimes, he continued, his voice softening. The building looks beautiful. You've created something special. I didn't know how to respond to this unexpected warmth from the man who had betrayed me so completely. Is there anything else, Ryan? I asked finally. No, that's all. I just wanted you to know that despite everything, I'm glad to see you thriving. After we hung up, I sat with the strange feeling the conversation had left me with. For so long, Ryan had occupied a clear category in my mind: betrayer, liar, catalyst for my life's upheaval. Hearing genuine admiration in his voice complicated that neat categorization. The next morning, I discussed Victoria's application with Karen, being transparent about our history. Wow, Karen said after I explained the situation. That's either incredibly brazen or genuinely redemptive of her. That's what I can't decide, I admitted. Her qualifications are solid. If I didn't know who she was, she'd definitely get an interview. So, interview her, Karen suggested. You're good at reading people. See which it is, brazen or redemptive. The wisdom in Karen's simple solution made me smile. When did you get so insightful about personnel decisions? Around the same time you started building an empire from ashes, she replied with a grin. 2 days later, Victoria sat across from me in our conference room, her resume and portfolio on the table between us. I had asked Karen to join the interview, both for her perspective and to maintain professional boundaries. For 90 minutes, we discussed nutritional theory, client approach, integration with other treatment modalities, and case studies from Victoria's training. Her responses were thoughtful, knowledgeable, and aligned with Renewal's philosophy of comprehensive wellness. One question remains, I said as the interview concluded. Given our history, how would you handle working in an environment I've created, truthfully? Victoria took a deep breath. With gratitude for the opportunity, professionalism toward everyone involved, and a commitment to contributing positively to what you've built. I can't change the past, Elizabeth, but I can acknowledge the harm done and choose a different path forward. After she left, Karen looked at me expectantly. Well? Her qualifications are exactly what we need, I acknowledged, and her answers demonstrated real alignment with our approach. But I don't know if I can separate the professional from the personal completely. If having her here would bring back what I've worked so hard to move beyond. Karen considered this thoughtfully. You know what strikes me about this whole situation? 2 years ago, you discovered Ryan and Victoria were building a future using resources stolen from you. Now, Victoria wants to contribute to the future you've built from those same circumstances. There's a symmetry there that's almost poetic. I hadn't considered it from that angle. So you think I should hire her? I think you should make the decision that best serves Renewal's mission and your own peace. Those two things don't have to conflict. After careful consideration, I offered Victoria the position with clear parameters: a 6-month probationary period, regular performance, reviews, and explicit expectations about professional boundaries. She accepted with what seemed like genuine appreciation for the opportunity. The weeks that followed brought another significant development. Our proposal for the Lakeside property was accepted by the City Council, with favorable terms that included tax incentives for the renovation and a formal partnership agreement for subsidized services. As we prepared for the public announcement, Councilman Wilson suggested expanding the original vision. What if the Lakeside Center specialized in services for specific populations? Veterans, seniors, recovering addicts, communities that often fall through the cracks of traditional healthcare? The idea resonated deeply. Each of those populations had unique wellness needs that our integrated approach could address effectively. Veterans dealing with physical injuries and PTSD, seniors navigating aging bodies in isolation, people in recovery needing whole-person support to maintain sobriety. We could design specialized programs for each group, I realized, excitement building. Trauma-informed approaches for veterans, fall prevention and social connection for seniors, stress management and physical rebuilding for people in recovery. Wilson nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. And the city has access to grant funding specifically for these populations. We could potentially expand the subsidized care program significantly. The vision for Renewal's second location evolved rapidly from a simple expansion to a specialized center with unique purpose and funding sources. The project that had begun as a practical solution to our space constraints was becoming something far more meaningful. Throughout this period, Victoria integrated into our team with surprising smoothness. Her nutritional counseling approach complemented our other services perfectly, and clients responded positively to her personalized protocols. If other staff members knew about her connection to my past, they showed no sign of it. I observed her work from a professional distance, neither avoiding nor seeking direct interaction beyond what was necessary for operations. She maintained similar boundaries, always cordial but never presuming familiarity. Then came the day that truly tested my capacity for separating past from present. I was in my office reviewing construction bids for the Lakeside renovation when my assistant announced an unexpected visitor, Ryan. For a moment, I considered declining to see him, but curiosity again prevailed. He entered hesitantly, as if unsure of his welcome. Elizabeth, thank you for seeing me. I know this is unexpected. What can I do for you, Ryan? I gestured to the chair across from my desk, maintaining the professional demeanor that had become my armor. I'm relocating to Chicago, he said, settling into the chair. A position with a larger firm. I wanted to tell you personally rather than having you hear it elsewhere. I wasn't sure why he thought this news warranted a personal visit. We'd been divorced for nearly 2 years with minimal contact. I appreciate the courtesy, but it wasn't necessary. There's more, he continued. I'm selling my condo here in Madison, and I wanted to make you an offer before it goes on the market. I'm not interested in buying your condo, Ryan. Not the condo, the Lake Geneva property. I stared at him, momentarily speechless. The Lakeside condo? I thought that purchase never went through after I filed the objection. It didn't. Initially, he confirmed. But after our divorce was finalized, I purchased a different unit in the same development. Smaller, less expensive. I convinced myself I still wanted that life, even if it wasn't with Victoria. The revelation that Ryan had purchased a Lake Geneva condo after all surprised me. It had been such a central symbol of his betrayal, the Lakeside property he'd planned to share with Victoria, purchased with our wedding renewal fund. Why would I want it? I asked, genuinely confused. Because it's a good investment, he replied simply. The property values there have increased 30% since I purchased it. You have a business mind now, Elizabeth. You understand asset appreciation. There was something almost respectful in how he acknowledged my business acumen, a dimension of me he'd never seemed to notice during our marriage. I'll consider it, I said, neither accepting nor rejecting outright. Send the details to my email. He nodded, rising to leave. At the door, he paused. You've built something remarkable. Here, Elizabeth, far beyond what I would have imagined possible when we were together. There was regret in his voice, but also something else, perhaps recognition of a capacity in me he had never truly seen. After Ryan left, I sat contemplating the strange full-circle moment. The man who had once stolen our renewal fund to purchase a lakeside property with another woman was now offering me a different lakeside property as an investment opportunity. life had a peculiar way of creating echoes. That evening, as I walked through Renewal after closing, I found Victoria in the nutrition consultation room, organizing client files. "You don't have to work this late," I said from the doorway, surprising myself by initiating conversation. She looked up, equally surprised. "I like the quiet. Helps me think through complex cases." I nodded, understanding the appeal of the building's peaceful atmosphere after hours. "Ryan came to see me today." Victoria's expression remained carefully neutral. "He mentioned he might. About the Lake Geneva property?" "Yes. Did you know about it?" "The one he bought after our divorce." She shook her head. "We haven't been involved for a long time, Elizabeth. Since before your center opened. He mentioned the property once. Said something about still wanting what it represented. Even if not with me." "What do you think it represented?" I asked, curious about her perspective. Victoria considered the question thoughtfully. "Escape, maybe. A clean slate. I think Ryan has always been looking for some external thing to complete him. A relationship, a property, a lifestyle. He doesn't realize the work has to happen internally first." Her insight into Ryan's character was surprisingly perceptive, echoing thoughts I'd had during our divorce, but never articulated so clearly. "Is that why you changed careers?" I asked. "Internal work?" She smiled slightly. "Partly. I realized I was helping pharmaceutical companies sell products that treated symptoms without addressing root causes. It felt increasingly hollow." We stood in silence for a moment. Two women whose lives had collided in painful ways, now finding unexpected common ground in a space built from that very collision. "Your probationary period ends next week," I said finally. "Karen and I have reviewed your performance. We'd like to offer you a permanent position, if you're interested in staying." Relief and gratitude washed across Victoria's face. "I am. Very much so." "Good. The Lakeside location will need a nutrition department head. The population will be serving there. Veterans, seniors, people in recovery will have complex nutritional needs. I think you'd be well suited for the role." Her eyes widened slightly. "Are you sure?" "I make decisions based on qualifications and demonstrated commitment," I said. "You've proved both. The past is relevant only to the extent it shapes who we are now, not as a permanent limitation on who we can become." As I walked to my car that night, I realized I was speaking not just about Victoria, but also about myself. The betrayal that had once defined my world had transformed into merely one chapter in a much larger story, a painful but ultimately productive catalyst for growth. The following week brought the official groundbreaking ceremony for Renewal's Lakeside location. City officials, healthcare partners, community members, and media gathered to celebrate what Councilman Wilson described as a new model for community wellness access. Standing at the podium, looking out at the assembled crowd, I felt a profound sense of completion. Not of the work itself, that was just beginning in many ways, but of the emotional journey that had brought me here. 2 years ago, I began my remarks. I found myself at a crossroads not of my choosing. A future I had planned was suddenly erased, replaced with uncertainty and loss. The audience quieted, sensing the personal nature of my words. What I discovered in that moment was that while we cannot control what happens to us, we can control what we build from those circumstances. Renewal began as my personal healing journey. It grew into a business that has now served over 2,000 clients. And today, it evolves into a community resource that will reach people who might otherwise go without care. I gestured to the building behind me, the old library that would soon be transformed into our second location. This center represents more than expanded business operations. It embodies a fundamental truth I've learned. Our deepest wounds can become our greatest purpose if we're brave enough to reimagine what healing looks like. As applause rose from the gathered crowd, I caught sight of Karen nodding proudly from the front row, Victoria standing respectfully toward the back, and, surprisingly, Ryan observing from the periphery, a complexity of emotions evident on his face even at a distance. In that moment, I understood that the true transformation hadn't been the Victorian building into a wellness center, or even the expansion to a second location. It had been my own evolution from betrayed wife to visionary founder, from victim of circumstance to architect of possibility. The wedding fund Ryan had stolen for his mistress had become the catalyst for something neither of us could have imagined during our marriage. And in the strange alchemy of life, even that betrayal had been transmuted into purpose. Later that evening, I received an email from Ryan with a simple subject line: "Congratulations." The body contained just a few sentences. "What you've created goes beyond impressive into the realm of inspiring. Sometimes I wonder if you would have discovered this path if I hadn't derailed the one we were on. If so, perhaps my greatest contribution to your life was leaving it. Wishing you continued success, Ryan." I closed the email without responding, neither accepting nor rejecting his attempt at finding meaning in his betrayal. Whatever role his actions had played in my journey was for me alone to define. Instead, I opened the business plan for renewals. Third location, a concept still in its earliest stages, but growing clearer in my mind each day. A wellness center specifically designed for adolescents and young adults, addressing the mental health crisis among young people with the same integrated approach that had proven so effective with our current clients. As I refined the vision, I realized how far I had traveled from that Tuesday morning when I discovered our empty savings account. The money Ryan had taken, intended to renew our vows, had instead renewed my entire life, purpose, and understanding of what I was capable of building. The betrayal that had once seemed like an ending had been merely the first chapter of a much larger story, one that continued to unfold in ways I could never have anticipated, but now enthusiastically embraced. The morning of our third anniversary celebration at Renewal Wellness Center dawned bright and clear, a perfect September day that seemed designed to complement the occasion. 3 years since opening our doors, 3 years since transforming, betrayal into purpose, 3 years of growth that had exceeded even my most optimistic projections. I arrived at the Victorian building early, wanting a few moments of solitude before the day's festivities began. The morning light streamed through the stained glass transom windows, casting jewel-toned patterns across the reception area's hardwood floors. I ran my hand along the carved banister of the central staircase, remembering how it had been hidden under layers of paint when we first purchased the building. So much had changed since those early days. What had begun as a single wellness center now encompassed 3 locations across Madison. Our original Victorian building, the Lakeside facility specializing in veterans, seniors, and addiction recovery, and our newest addition, the Youth Wellness Campus on the North Side, dedicated to adolescent and young adult mental health. My phone buzzed with a text from Karen. "News crew will be here at 9. Mayor confirmed for 10:30 ribbon cutting." Today marked not just our anniversary, but the official opening of our renewal. Foundation offices, the nonprofit arm we'd established to expand our subsidized care programs and conduct research on integrated wellness approaches. Our administrative director, Melissa, arrived next, carrying a stack of press packets for the media. "Morning, Elizabeth. The caterers are setting up in the garden, and the tech team is doing final checks on the presentation equipment. Thank you, Melissa. Any word from Dr. Chen?" Dr. Sarah Chen, our research director and the Foundation's first official hire, was flying in from a conference in Boston. Her flight had been delayed the previous evening. "Just got a text. Her cab is about 10 minutes out." I nodded, relieved. Sarah's presentation on our preliminary research findings was a centerpiece of today's event. The data her team had compiled over the past year showed remarkable outcomes from our integrated approach, particularly among veteran populations dealing with chronic pain and PTSD. By 9:30, the center hummed with activity. Staff members put finishing touches on displays highlighting our programs. Board members mingled with major donors in the garden. Local media set up cameras and lighting in the main presentation room. Victoria approached me as I reviewed the event schedule one final time. 3 years after joining Renewal, she now served as our clinical nutrition director, overseeing dietary programs across all 3 locations. "The health department officials are here," she said quietly. "They're asking about inspection certificates for the food service areas." I suppressed a sigh. We'd submitted all required documentation weeks ago, but bureaucracy often moved at its own pace. "Show them to my office. I'll handle it." As Victoria led the officials away, Karen appeared at my side. "Everything under control?" "Just the usual last-minute hiccups. Nothing we haven't handled before." Karen smiled knowingly. "Remember our first anniversary celebration? When the plumbing backed up in the basement hydrotherapy room 30 minutes before guests arrived?" I laughed at the memory. "Or our second anniversary when the power went out during the mayor's speech?" "We've come a long way," Karen agreed, surveying the bustling scene around us. "Sometimes I can't believe what we've built." I was just thinking the same thing. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unexpected source, Ryan. "Saw the news about today's celebration. Congratulations on all you've accomplished. Truly impressive." I showed the message to Karen, who raised an eyebrow. "Still keeping tabs? On you from Chicago?" Apparently. Ryan and I had established a cordial if distant relationship in recent years. Occasional texts marking significant milestones. A brief lunch when he visited Madison for business last year. Nothing that suggested lingering attachment, but rather a mutual acknowledgement that our shared history, however painful at points, had led us both to different places. "Are you going to respond?" Karen asked. "Later," I decided, slipping my phone back into my pocket. Today is about looking forward, not back. At 10:15, I took a moment to step outside, needing a brief reprieve from the growing crowd inside. The garden behind the Victorian had become one of my favorite spaces, a tranquil oasis in the midst of our busy center. Japanese maples, now turning brilliant red with the season, shaded curved pathways that wound between meditation benches and small water features. "It's quite remarkable," came a voice from behind me. I turned to find James Wilson, now Madison's mayor, admiring the garden. "Hard to believe this was an abandoned parking lot when you purchased the property." "Nature reclaims spaces quickly when given the chance," I replied, smiling at his early arrival. "Thank you for making time for our celebration today." I wouldn't miss it. Renewal has become one of Madison's greatest success stories. Exactly the kind of public-private partnership other cities are trying to emulate. We walked together through the garden as Wilson updated me on the city's plans to expand the subsidy program for our services. What had begun as a modest initiative at our Lakeside location had grown into a comprehensive wellness access program serving hundreds of Madison residents who would otherwise go without care. The latest budget includes a 30% increase for next year, Wilson explained. The cost savings to our emergency services alone more than justifies the investment. When people receive preventative wellness care, they use emergency rooms less frequently. The economic argument for preventative wellness had been central to securing ongoing public funding. Our data showed that every dollar invested in integrated wellness services saved the healthcare system nearly $3 in emergency and crisis intervention costs. As we re-entered the building for the ribbon-cutting ceremony, I caught sight of a familiar figure speaking with Dr. Chen near the refreshment table, Thomas Rivera, CEO of Midwest Healthcare System. Thomas and I had been negotiating a potential partnership that would bring Renewal's integrated approach to hospitals throughout Wisconsin. "Thomas, I'm glad you could make it," I said, joining them. "I see you've met Dr. Chen." "We were just discussing the impressive results from your veterans program," Thomas said, shaking my hand warmly. The pain management outcomes in particular are extraordinary. Sarah's research team deserves the credit, I replied. They've been meticulous in documenting exactly which combination of therapies produces optimal results for different conditions. That's what makes your approach so valuable, Thomas noted. Most alternative therapies lack the rigorous data collection to validate their efficacy. You've bridged that gap. The conversation was interrupted by Melissa signaling that it was time to begin the formal program. I excused myself to take my place at the podium, surveying the gathered crowd, staff members, clients, community partners, media representatives, and government officials, all assembled to celebrate what renewal had become. 3 years ago, I began. Many people thought I was making a terrible mistake. A physical therapist with no business experience, investing her entire settlement from a difficult divorce into a wellness center concept that many considered financially unsustainable. Gentle laughter rippled through the audience. Even my closest advisors, including my wonderful business partner Karen, questioned whether integrating so many different therapeutic approaches under one roof could actually work. Conventional wisdom said specialization was the path to success, not integration. I paused, making eye contact with various people throughout the room. What those doubts failed to account for was the fundamental human need for holistic healing. We don't experience physical pain, emotional distress, and spiritual disconnection as separate challenges. We experience them as interconnected dimensions of our well-being. Why then should we treat them in isolation from one another? As I continued outlining Renewal's journey from concept to thriving enterprise, I found myself reflecting on my own parallel journey. The devastating discovery of Ryan's betrayal had initially felt like one isolated injury, a financial theft. But the aftermath had revealed how interconnected that betrayal was with other dimensions of my life. My sense of identity, my trust in relationships, my professional purpose, my healing had required more than just financial restitution. It had demanded a comprehensive reevaluation and rebuilding across multiple dimensions of my life, exactly the integrated approach that now defined Renewal's philosophy of care. After the formal presentations and ribbon-cutting ceremony, the celebration transitioned to a more casual reception in the garden. As I moved among the guests, accepting congratulations and discussing future initiatives, I noticed Victoria deep in conversation with a man I didn't recognize. Distinguished, probably in his 60s, with silver hair and an athletic build. Victoria caught my eye and waved me over. "Elizabeth, I'd like you to meet my father, George Winters. Dad, this is Elizabeth Turner, the founder and CEO of Renewal." I concealed my surprise as I shook his hand. In 3 years of working together, Victoria had rarely mentioned her family. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Winters." "The pleasure is mine," he replied with genuine warmth. "My daughter speaks of you with tremendous respect. What you've built here is extraordinary." "Victoria has been instrumental to our success," I said sincerely. "Our nutritional programs are among our most highly rated services across all locations." "She mentioned you're considering expansion beyond Wisconsin," George said. "We're exploring possibilities," I acknowledged, curious about his interest. Victoria smiled slightly. "Dad isn't just being polite, Elizabeth. He chairs the board of Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago. They've been looking at integrated wellness models." Now I understood Victoria's sudden introduction. This wasn't just social, it was strategic. "We should discuss this further," George suggested. "Perhaps over lunch next week? I'll be in Madison through Friday." By the time the celebration wound down late that afternoon, I had collected 7 business cards from healthcare executives interested in exploring partnerships or consulting arrangements with Renewal. What had begun as an anniversary celebration had evolved into an unexpected business development opportunity. Karen joined me in my office as the last guests departed. So much for keeping a low profile, she teased, dropping into the chair across from my desk. Northwestern Memorial Hospital? That's major league. Apparently, Victoria has connections. She never mentioned, I mused, still processing the unexpected introduction to her father. Speaking of Victoria, Karen said, leaning forward, have you given any more thought to her proposal? 2 weeks earlier, Victoria had submitted a detailed proposal for a potential 4th renewal location, one specializing in women's health, across all life stages. The concept was compelling and well-researched, addressing a significant gap in our current service model. But the proposal included something unexpected. Victoria wanted to be a financial partner in the new location, not just its clinical director. I'm still considering it, I admitted. The business case is sound. She's identified the perfect location. The market analysis shows strong demand. But it's Victoria, Karen finished for me. The woman who was once involved with your ex-husband. That's part of it, I acknowledged. Though honestly, that aspect bothers me less than it once did. She's proven herself here consistently for 3 years. What's the real hesitation then? I considered the question carefully. Renewal has been solely mine from the beginning. My vision, my financial risk, my leadership. Taking on a business partner, especially for a new location, changes that dynamic fundamentally. Karen nodded thoughtfully. True. But isn't that the natural evolution of any growing enterprise? At some point, the founder's direct control has to give way to a more distributed leadership model if the organization is going to continue expanding. That's what Mark says too, I admitted, referencing my business advisor. He thinks Victoria's proposal might be the perfect opportunity to test a new ownership structure without risking the established locations. For what it's worth, Karen added, I've worked closely with Victoria since she joined us. Her clinical judgment is excellent, her business instincts are solid, and she genuinely believes in Renewal's mission. After Karen left, I remained in my office as evening shadows lengthened across the garden outside my window. The day's celebration had highlighted how far Renewal had come in 3 years. From a single location born of personal healing to a multi-site enterprise with growing influence in the healthcare landscape. Growth required evolution. Evolution required change. Change required risk. The same principles that had guided me from betrayed wife to successful entrepreneur now challenged me to consider the next phase of Renewal's development. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas Rivera. Excellent event today. My team would like to discuss piloting your approach in 2 of our hospitals. Available for dinner next Tuesday? Another buzz followed immediately. Also, Northwestern's. George Winters called me. They're interested too. Word was spreading faster than I had anticipated. The validation was gratifying, but it also created new pressure to scale our approach quickly while maintaining the quality and integration that made it effective. I finally replied to Ryan's earlier message. Thank you. It's grown beyond what I initially envisioned. His response came quickly. Isn't that the definition of true success? Creating something that evolves beyond its creator's original vision. You've done that brilliantly. The observation was surprisingly insightful coming from Ryan. During our marriage, he had rarely acknowledged my professional capabilities or ambitions. Now, from the distance of years and geography, he seemed to see me more clearly than he ever had when we were together. The following morning, I asked Victoria to meet me for coffee at the small cafe across from our original location. I wanted to discuss her proposal away from the center in neutral territory. She arrived precisely on time, as was her habit, dressed in the professional but approachable style she had adopted as Renewal's clinical nutrition director. Tailored pants, a jewel-toned blouse, and a simple blazer. Thank you for making time for this, I said after we had ordered. Yesterday was quite the whirlwind. It was extraordinary, Victoria agreed. The mayor's announcement about expanded funding was particularly impressive. I wanted to talk about your proposal for the women's health location, I said, getting directly to the point. It's exceptionally well developed. The concept is strong, the market analysis is compelling, and the location you've identified is ideal. Hope flickered in her eyes, but she maintained her professional composure. Thank you. I've been researching and refining the concept for nearly a year. What made you decide to propose a financial partnership rather than simply developing it as a new renewal location under the existing structure? Victoria took a measured sip of her coffee before answering. 2 reasons. First, I genuinely believe in maintaining skin in the game. If I'm asking you to invest in this concept, I should be willing to invest in it too. Second, she hesitated briefly. I want to build something that's partly mine, something that contributes to Renewal's mission, but also represents my personal commitment to making amends. Making amends? I repeated, surprised by her phrasing. Elizabeth, we've worked together successfully for 3 years, but we've never really addressed the elephant in the room. My relationship with Ryan caused you tremendous pain. The financial impact was ultimately rectified through your divorce, settlement, but the emotional harm was real. Building something positive together feels like a more meaningful form of reconciliation than simply being your employee. Her honesty caught me off guard. In our professional relationship, we had maintained a careful, unspoken agreement not to reference the circumstances that had first connected our lives. I appreciate your candor, I said finally, but a business partnership shouldn't be built on emotional debts, real or perceived. I agree completely, Victoria said quickly. The business case stands on its own merits. I'm simply acknowledging that my motivation includes personal as well as professional dimensions. We spent the next hour discussing specifics of her proposal, financial, projections, staffing models, service integration approaches. Victoria had clearly done her homework, anticipating questions and concerns with well-researched responses. I'll need a few days to consider all of this, I said as our meeting concluded. There are structural and legal considerations beyond just the business case. Of course. Take whatever time you need. Victoria gathered her materials and stood to leave, then paused. Regardless of your decision, I want you to know that working at Renewal has transformed my understanding of what healthcare can and should be. You've built something truly revolutionary. After she left, I remained at the cafe, watching people enter and exit the Victorian across the street, clients arriving for appointments, practitioners moving between treatment rooms, the steady flow of healing work continuing regardless of the executive decisions being considered. My phone buzzed with a text from Karen. Northwestern's board chairman in your office when you return. Unscheduled visit. I hurried back to find George Winters waiting in our conference room, reviewing materials from yesterday's presentation. Mr. Winters, I apologize for not being available when you arrived, I said, joining him. No apology necessary, he replied warmly. Your staff has been most accommodating, and please, call me George. What brings you back so soon after yesterday's event? Straightforward business interest, he said, setting aside the materials. Northwestern's board has authorized me to explore a potential joint venture with Renewal. We'd like to implement your integrated wellness model as a pilot program within our hospital system. That's a significant opportunity, I acknowledged, careful to maintain a neutral tone despite my surprise at the speed of his approach. But also a complex undertaking. Our model relies heavily on the interconnection between various therapeutic approaches and practitioners. Precisely why we're interested in a joint venture rather than simply trying to replicate your approach internally, George explained. We recognize that the cultural and operational aspects of your model are as important as the specific therapies involved. What exactly are you proposing? A new entity, jointly owned by Northwestern and Renewal, that would establish integrated Wellness centers within or adjacent to 3 of our hospital campuses initially. Northwestern would provide the facilities, medical integration, and patient referrals. Renewal would provide the operational model, practitioner training, and program development. The proposal was both flattering and daunting. Northwestern Memorial was one of the most prestigious healthcare systems in the Midwest. A partnership would dramatically accelerate Renewal's influence and reach. This would represent a significant pivot from our current operation, I noted. We've focused exclusively on standalone wellness centers until now. Indeed, George agreed. But your research data suggests your approach could significantly improve outcomes for hospital patients, particularly those with chronic conditions or recovering from major medical interventions. Integrating your model into traditional healthcare delivery is the logical next step. We discussed broad parameters for nearly an hour: potential terms, implementation timelines, governance structures. George was clearly prepared and serious about the opportunity. "I'd like you to meet with our executive team in Chicago next week," he suggested as our discussion concluded. "A preliminary exploration, nothing binding. Just an opportunity to determine if there's sufficient alignment to pursue this further." After he left, I called an emergency meeting with Karen, Mark Chen, and our legal counsel, Rebecca Santos. The Northwestern proposal, coming immediately after Victoria's partnership proposal, represented a critical inflection point for Renewal's future. "The timing is uncanny," Karen observed after I summarized both opportunities. Victoria proposes a partnership for a new women's health location, and the next day her father proposes a joint venture with Northwestern. "Do you think they coordinated this?" Rebecca asked, always focused on potential legal complications. "I don't believe so," I replied. Victoria seemed genuinely surprised when her father appeared at yesterday's event, and the Northwestern proposal is significantly different in scope and structure from what she proposed. Whether coordinated or coincidental, both proposals represent substantial changes to Renewal's current structure, Mark noted. The question is whether you're ready for that evolution. The discussion continued for hours, weighing pros and cons, exploring alternative approaches, identifying potential risks and opportunities. By the time we concluded, the Victorian building had grown quiet, most staff and clients having departed for the day. I remained in my office, watching darkness fall over the garden as I considered the decisions before me. 3 years ago, when Ryan's betrayal had catalyzed my vision for Renewal, I could never have imagined facing such expansive opportunities. My phone rang. Sarah Chen calling from the Lakeside location. "Elizabeth, I've just reviewed the latest data from our veterans' pain management program. The 6-month follow-up results are even better than our preliminary findings suggested. 73% reporting significant improvement, compared to 28% in the control group receiving standard care. That's remarkable," I said, genuinely excited by the validation of our approach. "Have you controlled for all the variables we discussed?" "Yes, and the statistical significance holds strong. This is publication quality research, Elizabeth. The kind that changes clinical practice guidelines." After we hung up, I walked through the quiet building, moving from room to room, remembering the early days when these spaces had been empty, waiting to be filled with purpose. Now, each room held stories of healing, physical pain alleviated, emotional wounds addressed, lives transformed through integrated care. Renewal had begun as my response to personal betrayal, a way to heal myself by creating healing for others. But it had grown beyond that origin story, becoming something larger than my individual journey. Perhaps that was the true measure of successful creation, not maintaining perpetual control, but building something resilient and purposeful enough to evolve beyond its creator's original vision. Wasn't that what Ryan had observed in his text yesterday? The next morning, I called Victoria and asked her to meet me at the site she had identified for the proposed Women's Health Center, a former community health clinic on Madison's West. side that had closed due to funding cuts the previous year. She was waiting when I arrived, standing before the single-story brick building with its boarded windows and neglected landscaping. Despite its current condition, the location had excellent potential: ample parking, good visibility, proximity to residential neighborhoods, and sufficient square footage for a comprehensive service offering. "Walk me through your vision for this space," I said as we approached the building. For the next hour, Victoria guided me through a detailed tour, describing how each area would be transformed: reception and intake procedures, treatment room configurations, communal spaces for group programs, specialized areas for prenatal services, menopause management, adolescent health, and sexual wellness. Her vision was comprehensive and thoughtfully developed, addressing women's health needs across the full lifespan with the same integrated approach that had proven so effective in our other locations. "The property is listed at $680,000, she explained as we concluded the tour. "My financial analysis suggests renovations would require approximately $450,000, plus another $300,000 for equipment, furnishings, and initial operating costs. I'm prepared to invest $500,000 for a 40% ownership stake." The numbers aligned with my own preliminary assessment. The total investment required was substantial, but justified by the market opportunity and projected returns. "Before I respond to your proposal," I said as we stood in what would become the main reception area, "I should inform you that your father visited me yesterday with a proposal from Northwestern Memorial, a joint venture to implement Renewal's approach within their hospital system." Victoria's surprise appeared genuine. He mentioned being impressed by Renewal, but he said nothing about a formal proposal. "I believe you," I assured her. "But the timing creates an interesting decision point for Renewal's future. Both opportunities represent significant evolution from our current model. Both involve new partnership structures. Both would extend our impact in important ways." "Are they mutually exclusive?" Victoria asked, demonstrating the practical, business thinking that had earned my professional respect over the years. "Not necessarily," I acknowledged, "but pursuing both simultaneously would stretch our resources and attention, and the Northwestern opportunity would require significant involvement from our senior clinical team, including you." Victoria considered this thoughtfully. "My proposal could be modified to accommodate that reality. Perhaps phased implementation or adjusted ownership percentages to reflect your greater ongoing involvement in establishing the hospital partnerships." Her flexibility and strategic thinking reinforced my growing conviction about the path forward. After 3 years of working closely together, Victoria had proven herself not just as a skilled practitioner, but as a strategic thinker aligned with Renewal's mission and values. "I'm inclined to accept both opportunities, with some modifications," I said finally. "For your proposal, I would want 51% ownership to remain with Renewal's parent company, with you holding 49% of this specific location. You would serve as executive director with full operational authority, while maintaining connectivity to our overall brand standards and integrated approach." Hope and excitement flashed across Victoria's face. "And the Northwestern opportunity? I'll meet with their executive team next week, as George suggested. If that conversation confirms alignment with our mission and approach, we'll pursue a structured joint venture with careful protection of our intellectual property and methodologies." As we walked back to our cars, I found myself reflecting on the strange circular journey that had brought us to this moment. The woman who had once been involved with my husband was now becoming my business partner. The betrayal that had once consumed my thoughts had evolved into merely one chapter in a much larger story of growth and purpose. "May I ask you something personal?" Victoria said as we reached the parking area. "You can ask," I replied, curious about what she might want to know after 3 years of carefully maintained professional boundaries. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if Ryan hadn't taken your wedding renewal fund? If you hadn't discovered his affair? Would you have created Renewal eventually anyway?" I considered the question thoughtfully. I believe most people have unrealized potential within them, capacities and visions that may or may not find expression, depending on life's circumstances. Ryan's betrayal was the catalyst that activated certain capacities within me that might otherwise have remained dormant. But those capacities were always there, waiting for the right conditions to emerge. Victoria nodded slowly. That's a generous perspective. It's not about generosity, I clarified. It's about accurately understanding cause and effect. Ryan's actions created conditions that prompted my response. But the nature and quality of that response came from within me, not from him. As I drove back to the original renewal location, I found myself looking forward rather than backward. The coming months would bring new challenges and opportunities, expanding our model into hospital settings, establishing our first partnership-based location, continuing to build the research foundation that validated our approach. The wedding fund Ryan had taken for his mistress had been transmuted into something neither of us could have imagined during our marriage. And in life's strange alchemy, even the mistress herself had become part of that ongoing transformation, contributing her skills and resources to furthering a vision that had emerged from the very betrayal she had participated in. There was a certain poetic justice in this evolution, not in the vengeful sense I might once have imagined, but in the deeper sense of life's tendency to create meaning from disorder, growth from disruption, and healing from wounding. The $42,000 wedding renewal fund that had disappeared from our joint account 3 years ago had multiplied many times over, not just in financial terms, but in impact, purpose, and possibility. What had been intended to renew vows between two people had instead renewed health and hope for thousands. As I pulled into my parking space at the Victorian building that had started it all, I felt a profound sense of gratitude, not for Ryan's betrayal itself, but for the unexpected journey it had initiated. A journey that continued to unfold in ways I could never have anticipated, but now embraced with open arms and clear vision. 5 years to the day after discovering Ryan's betrayal, I stood on the rooftop garden of Renewal's newest location in downtown Chicago, watching the sunset paint the skyline in amber and gold. The journey from betrayed wife to CEO of a regional wellness enterprise still felt surreal at times, especially in moments of quiet reflection like this one. What had begun as a single wellness center in Madison had evolved into something I could never have imagined that morning when I discovered our empty savings account. Renewal now encompassed 7 locations across 3 states, with partnerships extending our approach into hospital systems throughout the Midwest. Our integrated wellness model had been featured in major medical journals, and healthcare providers from across the country regularly visited our flagship Victorian location to learn our methods. "There you are," came Victoria's voice from behind me. "The governor's team just arrived. They're waiting in the main reception area." I nodded, taking one last moment to appreciate the view before turning to face my business partner. Victoria had evolved as much as Renewal itself over the years. The former pharmaceutical rep who had once been involved with my husband was now executive director of 2 Renewal locations and a key strategist in our expansion plans. Her women's health center had become our most profitable location, and her approach to nutritional integration was now standardized across all Renewal facilities. "How does it feel?" she asked, gesturing toward the Chicago skyline. "Opening our first location in Ryan's new hometown?" The question caught me off guard. Victoria rarely mentioned Ryan, maintaining professional boundaries despite our increasingly collaborative relationship. "I hadn't thought about it that way," I admitted. "This location represents strategic growth for Renewal, not any personal statement." Victoria smiled slightly. "Of course, but there's a certain poetic symmetry to it." She wasn't wrong. Opening a flagship wellness center in Chicago, where Ryan had relocated after our divorce, did create an interesting narrative. Not that he was the reason we'd expanded here. The Northwestern Memorial Partnership had been the catalyst for our Chicago presence. But still, The coincidence wasn't lost on me. "I suppose there is," I acknowledged, though Ryan is a very small footnote in Renewal's story now. We made our way downstairs to greet the governor, who had championed legislation making integrated wellness services like ours eligible for state insurance coverage. The new policy would dramatically expand access for patients who couldn't afford out-of-pocket care, extending Renewal's impact far beyond our physical locations. The reception area of our Chicago center reflected how far we'd come from our first location. While the Victorian building in Madison retained its historic charm, this space embodied sleek, contemporary design, floor-to-ceiling windows, sustainable bamboo flooring, living plant walls, and subtle technology integration. The atmosphere remained welcoming and healing-focused, but with a sophistication that appealed to urban professionals. "Governor Anderson, welcome to Renewal Chicago," I greeted, extending my hand. "We're honored by your support for tonight's opening." "The honor is mine, Ms. Turner," she replied warmly. "What you've created here represents exactly the kind of healthcare innovation our state needs. Integrated, prevention-focused, accessible." As I guided the governor through the facility, explaining our approach and introducing key team members, I found myself reflecting on how Renewal's vocabulary had evolved. In the early days, I had described what we did in personal terms: wellness, healing, restoration. Now I regularly use terms like outcomes data, preventative care metrics, and healthcare system integration. The growth hadn't changed our core mission, but it had certainly expanded our language and framework. After completing the tour and official ribbon-cutting ceremony, the evening transitioned to a celebratory reception. Healthcare executives, community leaders, and media representatives mingled throughout the space, sampling organic refreshments and experiencing mini demonstrations of our various therapeutic modalities. Karen appeared at my side, champagne flute in hand. "This is quite a long way from unpacking massage tables in the Victorian, isn't it?" I smiled at my oldest friend and most trusted advisor. Karen had been with me from the beginning, helping transform betrayal into purpose when the wound was still fresh. Now she served as Chief Operating Officer for the entire Renewal enterprise, overseeing operations across all locations while maintaining her clinical practice one day each week. "Sometimes I miss those simpler days," I admitted, "when we knew every client by name and handled every aspect of operations ourselves." "Nostalgia is lovely," Karen replied pragmatically, "but impact requires scale. We're helping thousands more people now than we could have with just one location." Was right, of course. Last year alone, Renewal had provided over 87,000 integrated treatment sessions across our locations, plus another 42,000 through our hospital partnerships. The numbers represented real people experiencing better health outcomes, reduced pain, improved function, and enhanced quality of life. "Speaking of scale," Karen continued, "Thomas Rivera is here. He mentioned wanting to discuss accelerating the hospital implementation timeline." Thomas, CEO of Midwest Healthcare System, had become one of our most important strategic partners. The pilot programs integrating Renewal's approach into 3 of his hospitals had shown such promising results that his board had approved expansion to all 12 facilities in their network. "I'll find him after I speak with Dr. Chen," I promised. She mentioned having preliminary results from the adolescent anxiety study. As if summoned by our conversation, Sarah Chen approached, tablet in hand. Our research director had built an impressive department that systematically documented the efficacy of our integrated approach, providing the evidence base that made healthcare systems and insurance companies take notice. "Elizabeth, I'm glad I caught you," Sarah said, her excitement evident despite her professional demeanor. "The first quarter data from the adolescent study is extraordinary. Participants receiving our integrated protocol showed a 47% reduction in anxiety symptoms compared to 17% in the standard care control group." "That's remarkable," I replied, genuinely thrilled by the validation. Is it holding across demographic subgroups? Consistent across gender, socioeconomic status, and racial demographics, Sarah confirmed. Even more interesting, the effect appears stronger in the cohort receiving services at our dedicated youth wellness campus compared to those treated within hospital settings. This finding reinforced what we had suspected, that the healing environment itself contributed significantly to outcomes. The physical spaces we created, with their careful attention to natural light, acoustic properties, natural elements, and sensory experiences, weren't just aesthetic choices, but therapeutic ones. As the evening progressed, I found myself drawn into conversation after conversation about expansion possibilities, research opportunities, and policy innovations. What had begun as a personal healing journey had evolved into a movement transforming how wellness care was conceptualized and delivered. Around 9 o'clock, I stepped away briefly, needing a moment of quiet amid the celebratory energy. I found a small meditation room at the end of the East Corridor, its walls painted in soothing blues and illuminated by gentle indirect lighting. Sitting on one of the floor cushions, I closed my eyes and took several deep breaths, centering myself amid the whirlwind of growth renewal had experienced. My phone vibrated softly in my pocket. I considered ignoring it, but years of executive responsibility had conditioned me to remain accessible. The screen displayed a name I hadn't expected, Ryan Turner. His message was simple. I just saw the news about Renewal Chicago opening tonight. Congratulations on bringing your vision to my adopted hometown. The journey you've taken from that painful chapter of our past to what you've created now is nothing short of inspirational. 5 years ago, such a message would have triggered a complex emotional response. Now it generated only mild curiosity and a detached appreciation for the acknowledgement. Ryan had become increasingly peripheral in my life story, a catalyst for change rather than a continuing presence. I typed a brief reply. Thank you, Ryan. Hope all is well with you in Chicago. His response came quickly. It is. I've been following Renewal's expansion with interest. Your approach to integrated wellness is revolutionary. Northwestern's implementation of your protocols has helped several of my clients. I hadn't realized Ryan had direct knowledge of our Northwestern partnership. You have clients receiving care there? I've shifted my financial advisory practice to focus on healthcare executives and physician groups, he explained. Several are affiliated with Northwestern. Your reputation in that circle is extraordinary. How strange that Ryan's professional life now intersected with the enterprise born from his betrayal. The universe had a peculiar sense of symmetry sometimes. I'm glad the partnership is serving patients well, I replied neutrally. That's always our primary measure of success. I returned my phone to my pocket and took a few more moments of quiet before rejoining the reception. As I moved through the crowded main hall, I spotted an unexpected figure near the refreshment table. George Winters, Victoria's father and our partner in the Northwestern joint venture, deep in conversation with a woman I didn't recognize. I approached them, curious about George's presence at our event without prior notice. George, what a pleasant surprise. I didn't realize you'd be joining us tonight. He turned with a warm smile. Elizabeth, I hope you don't mind the unexpected appearance. I was showing Margaret your remarkable facility. Not at all. We're honored to have you both. I extended my hand to the woman. Elizabeth Turner, Renewal's founder and CEO. Margaret Winters, she replied with a firm handshake. I've heard so much about you and your work. The surname registered immediately. Winters, are you? Victoria's mother, she confirmed, with a smile that instantly revealed the resemblance between them. And George's much better half. In the 5 years Victoria had worked with Renewal, and the 3 years we'd partnered with Northwestern through George, I had never met Victoria's mother. She had remained an abstract figure mentioned occasionally in passing. It's wonderful to finally meet you, I said sincerely. Victoria has been an invaluable part of our leadership team. We're extremely proud of what she's accomplished here, Margaret replied, particularly given the complicated beginnings. Her careful phrasing acknowledged the elephant in the room without directly addressing it: Victoria's former relationship with Ryan and its connection to Renewal's origin story. Complex beginnings often lead to the most meaningful journeys, I offered diplomatically. Margaret's expression softened. Indeed they do. In fact, that's partly why we're here tonight. George and I have been discussing the possibility of establishing a foundation specifically focused on expanding access to integrated wellness services for underserved communities. Victoria mentioned you had extensive experience in nonprofit management, George added. Margaret ran the Chicago Children's Health Initiative for 15 years before retiring last year. Not retiring, Margaret corrected with a smile. Pivoting. And this new foundation concept feels like exactly the right pivot at the right time. We spent the next 20 minutes discussing their vision for the foundation and how it might align with Renewal's mission. The potential synergies were immediately apparent. Their foundation could provide funding for patients who couldn't afford services, while Renewal could deliver the integrated care model through our existing infrastructure. As they departed, later that evening, promising to send a formal proposal within the week, I found myself marveling at life's unexpected symmetries. The parents of the woman who had once been involved with my husband were now proposing a partnership that could dramatically extend Renewal's impact among vulnerable populations. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of conversations, media interviews, and strategic discussions. By the time the last guest departed shortly after midnight, I was physically exhausted, but mentally energized by the possibilities that had emerged throughout the night. Karen and I remained behind with the cleanup crew, debriefing on key interactions and follow-up priorities. So, she said as we collected abandoned champagne flutes from the rooftop garden, Ryan reached out? I shouldn't have been surprised. By her awareness, Karen had an uncanny ability to notice details even amid chaos. Just a congratulatory text about the Chicago opening. And how did that feel? I considered the question thoughtfully. Like receiving a message from a distant acquaintance. Polite, appropriate, emotionally neutral. Karen nodded approvingly. That's significant progress from where you were 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I was defining myself largely in relation to his betrayal, I acknowledged. Now it feels like ancient history, a chapter long closed in a much larger story. Speaking of chapters, Karen said, changing subjects smoothly, Thomas Rivera mentioned the possibility of acquiring the Westlake Properties Clinic network, 7 established wellness clinics across Michigan that could be converted to the Renewal model. The potential acquisition represented yet another significant expansion opportunity, our first through purchase rather than new development or partnership. What's your initial assessment? Their facilities are well located but conventionally designed. They'd need substantial renovation to create the healing environments our approach requires. Their practitioner team is solid clinically, but would need significant training in our integrated methodology. Financially, the asking price is reasonable, given their existing client base and revenue streams. Let's have Mark run a complete analysis, I decided, referring to our longtime business advisor. If the numbers work and the cultural integration seems feasible, it could accelerate our Michigan presence considerably. As we completed our debriefing and prepared to leave, Victoria rejoined us, having finished coordinating with the security team for the building's overnight protocols. The governor's office called, she reported. They'd like to feature Renewal in their upcoming healthcare innovation showcase at the Capitol next month. Excellent, Karen replied. That's perfect. Timing with the new insurance coverage legislation implementation. Victoria nodded in agreement, then hesitated slightly. Also, I wanted to thank you both for welcoming my parents tonight. I know their appearance was unexpected. Their foundation concept is intriguing, I said. The potential for expanding. Access to underserved communities aligns perfectly with our mission. My mother has been wanting to meet you for years, Victoria admitted. She's followed Renewal's growth with great interest, but wasn't sure if her presence would be welcome given the history. The past is relevant only to the extent it shapes who we are now, I replied, echoing words I had spoken to Victoria years earlier. Not as a permanent limitation on who we can become. Victoria smiled in recognition of the reference. You said that to me during my probationary period review. It's become something of a personal mantra since then. After finalizing arrangements for the following morning's executive team meeting, we each departed for our respective hotels. The Chicago facility included guest accommodations for visiting practitioners and executives from other Renewal locations, but tonight, with all rooms allocated to VIP guests from the opening, we had booked rooms at a nearby boutique hotel. In the quiet of my hotel room, I stood at the window overlooking the Chicago skyline, now illuminated against the night sky. Somewhere in this vast urban landscape, Ryan was presumably going about his life, just as I was going about mine. Our paths, once intertwined and later painfully severed, now ran parallel with occasional points of distant intersection. I opened my laptop to review the draft annual report our marketing team had prepared, focusing particularly on the impact metrics that quantified Renewal's work across all locations. The numbers were impressive, clinical outcomes showing significant improvement across multiple health indicators, patient satisfaction ratings consistently above 90%, practitioner retention rates far exceeding industry averages. But beyond the metrics lay the human stories that gave those numbers meaning. The veteran who could finally sleep through the night without medication after decades of PTSD-induced insomnia. The teenager whose debilitating anxiety had diminished, enough to return to school and social activities. The cancer survivor whose integrated recovery support had restored not just physical function, but joy in living. These stories, thousands of them now, represented the true legacy of what had emerged from that painful Tuesday morning 5 years ago when I discovered our empty savings account. What Ryan had intended as an escape fund for his affair had instead funded the seed of an enterprise that now helped thousands heal from their own wounds, both physical and emotional. My phone chimed with an email notification from our financial director, the preliminary third-quarter financial results for all Renewal locations. I scanned the report quickly, noting with satisfaction that not only was each location operating profitably, but our foundation arm had secured sufficient grant funding to provide subsidized care to over 3,000 patients who would otherwise be unable to afford our services. Another email followed immediately, this one from Sarah Chen with the latest research findings from our hospital integration programs. The data continued to show significantly better outcomes for patients receiving our integrated approach compared to standard care protocols alone. Most notably, opioid use for pain management had decreased by 42% among patients in our integrated care pathways. As I prepared for bed, my thoughts drifted to the conversations that would unfold during tomorrow's executive team meeting. We needed to make decisions about expansion priorities, research initiatives, and strategic partnerships. All considerations that would have seemed incomprehensibly distant 5 years ago when I was simply trying to process the shock of betrayal and financial theft. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the hotel room windows. I completed my usual meditation practice before preparing for the day, centering myself for the important discussions ahead. The executive team meeting would include leadership from all 7 Renewal locations, our research department, the foundation, and our hospital integration team. 15 people whose combined expertise and commitment had transformed my initial vision into a thriving enterprise. Over breakfast in the hotel restaurant, I reviewed my notes for the meeting, particularly regarding the potential Westlake Properties acquisition. If approved, this would represent our first expansion through purchase rather than new development, a significant strategic shift that warranted careful consideration. Karen joined me, coffee in hand. Ready for today? The Michigan acquisition. Discussion could get interesting. I've been reviewing the preliminary financials, I replied. The numbers make sense, but I'm more concerned about cultural integration. Renewal's success depends on practitioners fully embracing our integrated philosophy. Acquiring an existing team means changing established patterns rather than building from scratch. Valid concern, Karen acknowledged. But the potential to accelerate our Michigan presence by 2 years makes it worth considering if we can develop an effective transition approach. Our conversation was interrupted by Victoria's arrival. Good morning. I've just had a call from my father. The Northwestern board has unanimously approved the expanded implementation plan. They want to incorporate our approach into all service lines, not just the initial pilot departments. This represented significant news. The Northwestern partnership had begun with limited implementation in pain management, rehabilitation, and integrative oncology. Expansion to all service lines would dramatically increase both the scope of our work and its impact on patient care. That's remarkable progress, I noted. Do they have a proposed timeline? Phased implementation over 18 months, beginning. With women's health and cardiovascular services next quarter. As we walked together toward the Chicago facility for our meeting, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this moment. From the ashes of betrayal had risen something none of us could have predicted, a pioneering enterprise reshaping how healthcare was delivered across multiple states. The executive team was already assembled in the conference room when we arrived, engaged in animated conversations about their respective locations and initiatives. These quarterly in-person gatherings served not just as decision-making forums, but as opportunities to strengthen the relationships that sustained our collaborative culture despite geographic distribution. I called the meeting to order and opened with an acknowledgement of the previous evening's successful launch, before transitioning to our formal agenda. For the next 4 hours, we engaged in thoughtful discussion about Renewal's future, the Michigan acquisition opportunity, the expanded Northwestern partnership, the proposed foundation with the Winters family, and emerging research initiatives. By meeting's end, we had reached consensus on key strategic directions. We would proceed with due diligence on the Michigan acquisition, while developing a comprehensive cultural integration plan. We would support Northwestern's expanded implementation timeline while ensuring quality control through enhanced training programs. We would pursue the foundation partnership with the Winters family, creating a separate legal entity with clear governance structures. As the team dispersed for lunch before afternoon breakout sessions, I remained in the conference room, reviewing my notes and reflecting on the decisions made. Each strategic direction represented not just business growth, but expanded impact, more people receiving care that addressed their whole being rather than isolated symptoms. Sarah Chen approached as I was organizing my materials. Elizabeth, do you have a moment? There's something I'd like to discuss privately. Of course, I replied, curious about her serious tone. What's on your mind? Sarah closed the conference room door before continuing. I've been approached by the National Institutes of Health about a potential role directing a new research initiative on integrated wellness approaches. They're allocating substantial funding to study models like ours that combine conventional and complementary therapies. My heart sank slightly at the implication. Sarah had been instrumental in building Renewal's research credibility, documenting our outcomes with rigorous methodology that satisfied even the most skeptical medical observers. Losing her would be a significant blow. That's a tremendous opportunity, I said sincerely, despite my disappointment. Your work deserves national recognition. Here's the thing, Sarah continued. I've proposed that the NIH establish this initiative as a partnership with Renewal, rather than recruiting me away. We could create a joint research institute that would significantly expand our current studies while providing federal funding and institutional credibility. Relief and excitement replaced my initial concern. That's a brilliant approach, Have they been receptive? Very. In fact, they're sending a delegation next month to visit our Madison research facilities and discuss formal partnership terms. Sarah's expression conveyed both pride and determination. What we've built here is too important to walk away from. The NIH partnership would amplify our impact, not redirect it. As Sarah departed to prepare for her afternoon presentation, I found myself once again awed by how far renewal had come from its painful beginnings. What had started as my personal response to betrayal had evolved into an organization capable of partnering with the nation's premier health research institution. The remainder of the day unfolded in a series of productive discussions about operational improvements, practitioner development programs, and technology integration initiatives. By late afternoon, the executive team had aligned on priorities for the coming quarter and responsibilities for implementation. As the meeting concluded, I thanked everyone for their contributions before making a final announcement. 5 years ago this week, I discovered that my then-husband had emptied our joint savings account, money we'd been saving for a vow renewal ceremony. That discovery led ultimately to the creation of Renewal, initially as my own healing journey, and later as a mission to bring integrated wellness to others. The room grew quiet, most team members aware of Renewal's origin story but unaccustomed to hearing me reference it directly. I'm sharing this anniversary not to dwell on the past, but to acknowledge how profoundly life can transform when we respond to wounds with vision rather than merely with reaction. What began in betrayal has evolved into this extraordinary community of healing that now spans 7 locations, 3 states, and countless human stories of transformation. I looked around the room at the team that had helped build this reality. Karen, who had been there from the beginning. Victoria, whose journey had intersected with mine in unexpected ways. Sarah, whose research validated our approach. And all the others who had joined along the way, bringing their gifts and commitment to our shared mission. Thank you for being part of this journey. What we've built together extends far beyond anything I could have created alone. And what we'll build in the coming years will continue to transform not just individual lives, but the very nature of healthcare delivery. As the team dispersed to prepare for evening flights back to their respective locations, I remained behind, taking a moment to absorb the significance of this 5-year milestone. The path from betrayal to purpose had not been straightforward or easy, but it had led to something far more meaningful than the marriage it had replaced. Ryan's decision to take our wedding renewal fund for his relationship with Victoria had set in motion a chain of events that none of us could have predicted. The money he'd stolen had seeded an enterprise that now employed over 200 people, served thousands of patients annually, and was reshaping healthcare delivery across the Midwest. Victoria, once the other woman in a painful triangle, had become a trusted business partner whose contributions to Renewal were substantial and growing. The very relationship that had catalyzed my pain had, through life's strange alchemy, contributed to healing on a scale I could never have imagined that Tuesday morning 5 years ago. As evening settled over Chicago, I made my way to the rooftop, garden once more, drawn to the expansive view that seemed to mirror Renewal's growing reach. The city lights winked on one by one as dusk deepened into night, creating a constellation of human presence across the urban landscape. My phone buzzed with a text from Karen. "Car will be ready in 20 minutes for airport transfer." I replied, confirming I headed back downstairs to collect my luggage. As the elevator descended, I found myself filled with an unexpected sense of completion, not of Renewal's work, which continued to evolve and expand, but of the emotional journey that had begun with betrayal and culminated in purpose. The wound that had once defined my waking thoughts had healed so completely that I could now reference it without pain, seeing it clearly for what it had become. Not an ending, but a beginning. Not destruction, but transformation. Not loss, but redirection toward a path I would never otherwise have discovered. The betrayal that had once seemed like the worst thing that could happen to me had ultimately revealed itself as the catalyst for the best thing I had ever created. And in that revelation lay a profound truth about human resilience, that our deepest wounds, when approached with vision rather than mere reaction, can become the very foundation upon which we build our most meaningful contributions to the world. As I walked through the Chicago facility one last time before departing, I ran my hand along the wall that displayed our mission statement in elegant raised lettering. Healing the whole person through integrated wellness. Words that had emerged from my own healing journey, but now guided an enterprise touching thousands of lives. The wedding fund Ryan had taken for his mistress had become the seed capital for my first wellness center, and I had used his hidden savings to launch what was now a healing enterprise spanning 3 states. The symmetry was both ironic and perfect, a reminder that even our most painful experiences can be transmuted into purpose when we choose creation over destruction, growth over grievance, and service over self-absorption. Outside, the car waited to take me to the airport. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, opportunities, and decisions as renewal continued its evolution. But tonight, 5 years from the betrayal that had catalyzed this journey, I could acknowledge with genuine gratitude that what had begun as an ending had become merely the first chapter of a much larger, more meaningful story, one that continued to unfold in ways I could never have anticipated, but now embraced with open arms and clear vision. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.